At 11:05 p.m. near Mansfield, Ohio, Captain Lawrence Coyne was trying to put an Army helicopter underneath a red light. The Huey had been level at 2,500 feet, heading north-northeast toward Cleveland at about 90 knots. Below it were dark farms, wooded ridges, rural roads, and the black water around Charles Mill Reservoir. Ahead of the windshield, the red light was coming in at the same altitude. Coyne had taken the controls from First Lieutenant Arrigo Jezzi and pushed the aircraft down. At first, the descent was controlled, 500 feet per minute. Then it became a dive. The light did not slide away to either side. It grew brighter and held the same bearing, and every pilot knows what that can mean. If a light grows while it stays fixed in the windscreen, it is not passing safely. It is coming to the same place you are. Coyne called Mansfield Tower and asked about high-performance aircraft in the area. He wanted an ordinary answer, an Air National Guard jet, a trainer, a traffic conflict with a call sign and a pilot and a controller who could tell him where it was. The tower acknowledged the helicopter once. After that, the radios gave him nothing he could use. Jezzi tried UHF and VHF. The equipment made the small channel and keying sounds of a system that still had power. No useful voice came back. Behind the front seats, Staff Sergeant Robert Uneksek and Staff Sergeant John Healy watched the red light keep coming. Coyne increased the descent to nearly 2,000 feet per minute. The Huey dropped towards 1,700 feet. The men felt the dive in their bodies. The dark land rose in the glass. The last altitude Coyne remembered seeing before he stopped looking at the panel was 1,700. The red light was still there. The crew waited for impact. Then the light stopped. It hung above and in front of the helicopter, close enough that it was no longer just a light. There was a body behind it, gray metallic looking, long across the windshield, with a slight raised dome along the top. A red light glowed at the forward end. A white light showed near the rear. Underneath, a green beam began to appear. For 10 or 12 seconds, the object held that position. No jet roar came with it. No blast hit the Huey. No ordinary aircraft ripped past and left a wake of panic behind it. The thing had come in like a collision, and then paused over the helicopter as if it had chosen that exact place. The green beam moved up. It crossed the nose of the Huey, entered the windshield, and climbed into the tinted upper panels above the front seats. The cockpit filled with green light. The instrument panel, the glass, the helmets, the shoulders of the men in back, Coyne's hands on the controls, all of it took on the same color. Then the object moved west. The white rear light stayed bright as it pulled away. Coyne and Healy watched it go. Healy kept it in sight for minutes, long enough to see it make a hard right turn toward the northwest, toward Lake Erie, before it vanished over the horizon. Only then did the crew come back to the instruments. The magnetic compass disc was rotating about 4 revolutions per minute. The altimeter read 3,500 feet. The vertical speed showed a climb of 1,000 feet per minute. The collective was still down from the evasive descent. Coyne had driven the helicopter lower to pass beneath the object. Somehow, while the green light crossed the cockpit and the object held above them, the Huey had climbed nearly 2,000 feet. He eased the controls carefully. The aircraft reached almost 3,800 feet before positive control came back. Then he brought it down toward the planned altitude and continued toward Cleveland. 5 hours earlier, there had been nothing in the night except routine. The men had gone to Columbus for flight physicals. At around 10 o'clock, the medical work was finished. By 10:30 p.m., they were back at Port Columbus International Airport with the UH-1H Super Huey that would take them home. That medical errand left a plain kind of paper trail behind the night. They had not come out of a bar or a party or a long private outing with no reason to be where they said they were. They had been checked over, cleared, and sent back to the airport for a routine reserve flight. Healy would later make the same point in ordinary language. They were sober, healthy, and doing what the schedule had put in front of them. The aircraft was Army Helicopter 68-15444, assigned to the Cleveland U.S. Army Reserve Flight Facility. Coyne was 36, a pilot with 19 years of flying experience, in command from the right front seat. Jezzi was 26, a chemical engineer and first lieutenant, flying from the left front seat for the first part of the return. Healy was 35, a Cleveland police officer and flight medic, seated behind Jezzi. Uneksek was 23, crew chief and computer technician, behind Coyne. They belonged to the 316th Medical Detachment, a helicopter ambulance reserve unit. They were not out looking for lights. They were returning from Columbus to Cleveland on a clear route 96 nautical miles north-northeast. The weather was clean, calm air, starry sky, visibility 15 miles or better. The last quarter moon was just rising. The Huey settled at 2,500 feet above sea level over ground that averaged around 1,200 feet. The heading was about 030. North of Columbus, the route was simple enough to feel almost automatic. Farm lights, reservoirs, dark stands of trees, and small Ohio towns below the nose, with Cleveland still ahead in the black. Mansfield sat off to the northwest. Charles Mill Reservoir lay near the line of flight. A crew at 2,500 feet could see long distances in that kind of visibility, but distance at night still had a way of lying. A light with no shape around it could be close or far, slow or fast, ordinary or not yet understood. For the first half hour, the cockpit stayed ordinary. Jesse flew. Coyne relaxed and smoked. Healy and Yanaksek watched the night through the side windows. The rotor and engine made the constant noise that turns into background for a crew that trusts the machine. About 10 miles south of Mansfield, Healy noticed a red light to the west. It was moving south and seemed brighter than a normal aircraft wing light. He watched it without turning it into an emergency. A single red light in the night can be many ordinary things. Roughly 2 minutes later, around 11:02 p.m., Yanaksek saw a steady red light on the southeast horizon. It did not flash like a tower beacon. It looked like aircraft traffic, but it was fixed enough in the wrong part of the sky that he kept watching. He watched for a minute, maybe 90 seconds. The red light held. Yanaksek leaned forward and called it to Coyne's attention. Coyne glanced at it and told him to keep an eye on it. 30 seconds passed, then Yanaksek saw the change. The light had turned toward them. It was no longer something out on the horizon. It was converging with the helicopter, same altitude, moving toward the nose of the Huey. Coyne verified it himself and took the controls. The cockpit tightened into procedure. Coyne called Mansfield Tower, 10 miles to the northwest. The first answer came back. Mansfield Tower, go ahead Army 15444. Coyne asked if any high-performance aircraft were in the area. No answer came back that helped them. Jesse tried the radios again. UHF, VHF, the tones were there. The response was not. Later, the silence would look worse on paper. Mansfield had no tape of even the first acknowledgement, and the last F-100 had landed at 10:27 p.m., more than 15 minutes before the encounter reached its peak. Coyne's first guess had been practical. Mansfield was an Air National Guard field, and an F-100 was exactly the kind of explanation a pilot would want to find before panic got inside the cockpit. A fast jet could make a red light frightening. A jet coming from the wrong angle could turn a calm flight into a near-miss report. So Coyne reached for the normal world first. He asked the tower. Jesse worked the radios. The men listened through the rotor noise for a controller to put a call sign on the light. In the helicopter, none of that was known yet. The only useful fact was the light. It grew brighter as the Huey descended. Coyne took the aircraft from a normal avoidance descent into a steep powered drop. The rate reached about 2,000 feet per minute. The airspeed came up around 100 knots. The men felt it. They had been at 2,500 feet. The last number Coyne remembered was 1,700. With the ground in that area near 1,000 feet, the Huey was only hundreds of feet above trees and roads. Low enough that a passing aircraft at the original altitude should have gone over them. Low enough that the attempt to get underneath it was real. It did not pass over. The red light came on. Coyne braced for the crash. Healy's voice broke through from the back. Look at that. Directly ahead and above the windshield was an object that nearly filled the front view. The crew described it against the stars, not as a smear of light, but as a shape, gray, metallic-looking, cigar-like, with a low dome along the top. Yanaksek thought there might be windows or panels along the dome. The red light sat at the bow. The white light sat at the stern, slightly indented. The green light came from aft and below, like a directional beam. Jesse's angle gave him less of the body. From the left front seat, he mainly saw a bright white light through the top greenhouse panels, comparable to the leading light of a small aircraft. Coyne, Yanaksek, and Healy had the broader view of the body and colored lights. The difference between the seats is one of the reasons the account sounds like a cockpit instead of a script. The men did not all deliver the same polished sentence. Jesse, lower and left, caught the white light through the top panels. Coyne had the controls and the windshield. Yanaksek had been tracking the red light before Coyne took over. Healy was behind the co-pilot, watching from the cabin. Each man had a different frame, and the object did not sit still long enough to become comfortable. The object stayed there for roughly 10 seconds. 10 seconds after a crew is prepared to die is enough time for shock to become observation. It is enough time for men in different seats to notice different things. It is enough time for a pilot to realize the impact has not come and something else has replaced it. The green beam climbed over the nose. It passed through the glass. The cockpit turned green. Coyne still had the aircraft set for descent. The collective was down. The Huey should have been continuing lower or at least behaving like a helicopter under a pilot's ordinary control. Instead, while the object hovered above and then moved away, the aircraft climbed. Coyne felt the climb before he had room to explain it. The others were still locked on the object. When the object finally broke west, one bump passed through the helicopter. No roar, no blast, no conventional wake except that single jolt as the relationship ended. The white rear light moved west and stayed intense. Coyne and Healy watched it make a decisive 45-degree turn toward the northwest, in the direction of Lake Erie. Jesse judged the departure faster than the 250-knot limit for aircraft below 10,000 feet, but not as fast as the terrifying approach. Then the instruments put the second shock in front of them. Compass disc turning, altimeter 3,500 feet, vertical speed 1,000 feet per minute up, collective still down. Coyne could not lower the collective any farther. He lifted it carefully because the aircraft had stopped matching the control position he knew. The Huey reached almost 3,800 feet before he regained positive control. Radio contact returned with Canton Akron. The flight continued to Cleveland without another visible object. The men had to sit inside the same sound, same panel, same aircraft, and carry the impossible part with them. The machine had climbed while it was set to descend. Coyne had felt the climb somewhere beneath the panic, but the others had not. They had all felt the dive. They had all understood the ground rising before the windshield. The climb did not arrive with the same bodily warning. It was discovered on the instruments afterward, when the red light was gone and the helicopter was still alive. The next day, the aircraft did not give anyone an easy mechanical confession. The rotors were checked with non-destructive testing. There was no sign of damage from extreme stress. The Huey had not come back with a cracked blade or a scorched panel that could carry the whole story by itself. The one stubborn piece of hardware was smaller and stranger. The magnetic compass would not behave, and eventually it had to be replaced. Below them, another account had already begun. Mrs. E.C. and 4 adolescents were driving south from Mansfield, toward their rural home around the same time. A bright red light caught their attention first. It moved south at what looked like medium altitude. They watched it for about half a minute before it disappeared behind the trees. About 5 minutes later, they were driving east on Route 430 near Charles Mill Reservoir. 2 bright lights appeared from the southeast, red and green. The red seemed to lead. The lights descended rapidly toward the road, bright enough and close enough together that the family watched them as one moving thing. At first, the lights were separated by only a small angle in the sky, close enough that the eye wanted to bind them together. They were not just tiny pinpoints either. They had size. They came down fast, then slowed, and that change in speed made Mrs. C pull off instead of simply driving past another night aircraft. Mrs. C pulled onto the shoulder. She kept the engine running. She kept the car lights on. The road was deserted. The reservoir area gave them trees, water, dark ground, and a sky that no longer felt empty. The red and green lights slowed and moved as a unit to the right of the car. Then another sound entered from the southwest, a beating sound, a lot of racket. The helicopter was coming. 2 of the children, 13-year-old cousins, jumped out and looked up. They saw the helicopter. They saw the other object near it, larger than the helicopter, described with the plain measuring words people use when there is no correct vocabulary, like a blimp, as big as a school bus, sort of pear-shaped. From the road, the object seemed to hover over or near the helicopter, roughly 500 feet back from the road and 500 feet above the trees. The ground there was close to 1,000 feet above sea level. If the Huey was near 1,700 feet during the encounter, it would have been a few hundred feet above the treetops, low enough for road witnesses to connect the sound and the lights. The boys did not describe an elegant craft with technical words. They reached for things they knew, like a blimp as big as a school bus, sort of pear-shaped. Those are rough comparisons, but they do something useful. They put the object above the trees, near the helicopter, and larger than a point of light. Their account did not need a cockpit altimeter to make the air crew's low-altitude memory more uncomfortable. Then the green light flared down. It lit the helicopter. It lit the trees. It lit the road. It lit the car. Everything turned green. The boys ran back into the vehicle. Their time outside was about a minute. Mrs. C drove on. Behind the car, the object crossed to the north side of the road. It appeared to move east for a few seconds, then reverse and climb toward the northwest, toward Mansfield, the same general direction Coyne and Healy saw from the air. The family had no altimeter, no radio log, no military aircraft report. They had a running car, a deserted road, a helicopter sound, a large object, and green light on the trees. The cockpit was no longer alone. The Huey landed in Cleveland. The flight plan was closed. Coyne notified the FAA Flight Service Station. He was told to report the incident to the FAA General Aviation District Office at Cleveland Hopkins. The military chain was notified as well. Mr. Porter of 83rd USARCOM was notified at 3:30 p.m. on October 19, the day after the flight. The disposition form was dated November 23, 1973. Its subject line was plane near midair collision with UFO report. The form named the helicopter Army Helicopter 68-15444. It named the time and place 23 viewing time 5 hours. Vicinity of Mansfield, Ohio. It named the crew Coyne, Jezzy or Jazzy, depending on spelling in the record, Yanaksek, and Healy. It named the unit the 316th Medical Detachment Helicopter Ambulance. The report recorded the red light on the east horizon, 90 degrees to the flight path. It recorded Yanaksek's estimate that the object converged at the same altitude with airspeed above 600 knots. It recorded Coyne taking control and descending from 2,500 to 1,700 feet. It recorded Mansfield Tower's acknowledgement and the failed attempt to identify high-performance aircraft. It recorded the object hesitating over the helicopter, moving west, accelerating, turning 45 degrees northwest, and the altimeter showing a climb with the collective full down. All 4 crewmen read the report and attested to it with signatures. The report was not a campfire tale scribbled years later from memory. It carried a date, a subject line, a unit, a helicopter number, a location, a time, and the names of the men inside the aircraft. It also preserved the spelling mess around Jezzy or Jazzy, the kind of small administrative imperfection that often survives in real files. The strange part sat inside ordinary military paperwork, which may be why the document still has weight. The form looks plain until the sentence reaches the climb. Coyne took the account to aviation people in person. P.J. Vollmer, chief of operations for the FAA at Cleveland Hopkins, later described Coyne as a man whose integrity and capability he trusted. Vollmer did not claim to know what the object was. He remembered that Coyne was shaken. Healy, a Cleveland detective as well as a flight medic, told a colleague about the encounter the same day. He had been skeptical before the flight. Afterward, he described the fear in plain language. The helicopter showed no dramatic wound, no burned skid, no torn metal, no impossible fragment, but the compass would not hold a heading afterward and had to be replaced. Coyne kept speaking about the event. He told his cousin, a reporter. He appeared in a documentary hosted by Rod Serling. He went on national television. In 1978, he testified before the United Nations and argued that incidents affecting flight safety deserve serious investigation. The account also passed through the strange public machinery of the 1970s UFO wave. The National Enquirer gave the crew a $5,000 award for a credible UFO report. That same year had Pascagoula, police calls, road sightings, Ohio Governor John Gilligan's report in Michigan, and hundreds of Ohio sightings near the end of 1973. The timing put the case in an odd place. Project Blue Book had closed in 1969, so the old Air Force intake machine was gone. The report did not disappear into a classic Blue Book file with a neat official stamp at the end. It moved through FAA attention, reserve channels, civilian investigators, newspaper coverage, television, and the private archives of people who kept chasing pilot cases after the government had stepped back from the subject. Jenny Zeidman, working through the civilian UFO investigation world, later built a detailed case study around the aircrew and the ground witnesses. William E. Jones and Warren Nicholson, independent researchers from Columbus, tracked down the Route 430 family account. That mattered on the timeline because the family had not been sitting with the crew, had no cockpit instruments to copy, and did not need to know the altitude math to describe a helicopter, a larger object, and green light over the trees. The altitude math stayed uncomfortable. The ground near the reservoir sat close to 1,000 feet above sea level. Coyne's last low reading was 1,700 feet. That put the Huey only hundreds of feet above the terrain, close enough for a family on the road to connect rotor noise with a moving lighted object near the treetops. It also meant the dive was not just a phrase in a report. If the object had passed safely above them at the original altitude, the crew would have had no reason to remember treetops rising in the glass. Coyne did not turn the encounter into a tidy answer when he spoke publicly. He stayed with the thing that had happened to the aircraft. In 1978, when he testified before the United Nations, the point was not that he could name the object. The point was that pilots and crews could meet something they could not identify, that the incident could affect control of an aircraft, and that aviation safety did not become less serious just because the object was strange. The best versions of the case keep that restraint. They do not need a recovered fragment. They do not need a secret hangar or a hidden body or a whispered agency name. They have a pilot who called a tower before he called anything supernatural. They have a co-pilot moving between radio frequencies. They have 2 men in back watching a red light become a body. They have a road family who saw the same green wash from below. They have a compass that failed afterward and a helicopter that came home without the kind of damage that would explain the climb. The noise around the wave can make any single case easier to dismiss. This one still comes back to the same hard objects: an aircraft, a crew, a road, a report, signed statements, instrument readings, and a climb where a descent should have been. The ordinary answers began in the sky. A fireball from the Orionid meteor shower could make a red or green light. A meteor can be brighter than expected. It can startle more than one group at once. It can make distance almost impossible to judge because it has no familiar size. If the event were only a bright light seen from a helicopter, a meteor would be a serious answer. But Yanaksek watched the red light for a minute to 90 seconds before he spoke up. Then he watched it turn toward the helicopter. The full sequence was estimated at several minutes. The object appeared to slow from a high-speed approach into a hover-like position above the Huey. The crew described a defined gray body against the stars. The green beam moved across the nose and into the cockpit. Ground witnesses described green light covering the road, trees, car, helicopter, and object. The departure included a hard turn toward the northwest. A meteor can explain a streak. It struggles with the pause. A conventional aircraft has a different problem. The crew first assumed aircraft. Coyne called Mansfield because aircraft was the practical answer. But a fixed-wing aircraft could not close at extreme speed, stop into a hover-like relationship, and then leave without giving the crew wings, engine pods, tail surfaces, strobes, markings, or noise to identify. A helicopter could hover, but not approach like a 600-knot object. A conventional aircraft within a few hundred feet should have made itself heard over the Huey in a way the crew could recognize. Mansfield had no confirmed high-performance aircraft in the air at the time, and the last F-100 had landed at 10.47. The colored lights also gave the aircraft answer a geometry problem. To match the crew's view, a normal aircraft would have needed to show the red, white, and green in a configuration that did not fit a clean pass and regulated flight. It would have had to be banked, tail on, head on, or moving across the line of sight in a way that should have revealed the rest of the machine. A plane close enough to fill the windshield should not stay featureless. A helicopter close enough to hover should not arrive like a fighter. None of that names the object. It leaves the night exactly where the witnesses left it. At 10:30, 4 reservists left Port Columbus under clear skies. Near Mansfield, Healy saw a red light to the west. Yanaksek saw another red light on the southeast horizon and watched it long enough to call forward. Coyne looked, stayed calm, and told him to keep watching. 30 seconds later, the light turned toward the Huey. Coyne took the controls. He called Mansfield. The tower answered once. The helicopter descended from 2,500 feet towards 1,700. The red light kept coming. The crew expected impact. The object stopped above the windshield. For about 10 seconds, the men saw a gray metallic body with red, white, and green lights. The green beam swept into the cockpit. The object accelerated west, turned northwest, and disappeared toward Lake Erie. The compass rotated. The altimeter read 3,500 feet. The helicopter was climbing with the collective down. Coyne regained control near 3,800 feet. En route 430, a woman and 4 adolescents saw red and green lights descend near a helicopter. 2 boys got out. Green light covered the road, trees, car, and aircraft. The boys got back in. The family drove away. The next day, the account entered official channels. The next month, 4 crewmen signed the report. Years later, the case still refused to become only a light in the sky. The last image stays clean. A helicopter over Ohio. A pilot trying to dive beneath a red light. 4 men waiting for impact. And when the light is gone, the aircraft is higher than before.